You're listening to the Rite Retirement Show.
The 70% of people out there listening to the show today are going to need some level of care. It doesn't necessarily mean that 70% are going to end up in a nursing home, but 70% of people will need some assistance out there. The biggest fear is running out of money for the retiree, but what we see is not enough people spend enough of their money.
Cris prides himself in what matters to you. This is the Rite Retirement Show.
Hi there, welcome to the Rite Retirement Show. I'm Louann Fulmar, and of course, with me today, certified financial planner and financial advisors, Cris Wallace and Graham Bauer. Cris is president of WG Financial Group, and Graham is also an enrolled agent there. And they're both here to give us some really good information, empowering advice to help you plan for and truly enjoy your retirement. If you have questions, here's the phone number. You may call or text the word visit to 256-937-2010. You can schedule a complimentary discovery session. Another thing you can do throughout the week, you can check us out on Facebook. Just search for WG Financial Group 256. And then Cris will put in any current topics about retirement that come up from when we record our show to when you hear our show. So you can always check out our Facebook. Remember our motto, plan, retire, play. You can listen anytime, anywhere. This show comes out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or also you can get it online at wgfinancialgroup.com. And Cris and Graham, hello to you.
Hello, Louann. How are you?
Great. So happy to be here with you again.
Yeah. Hey, Louann. Good to talk to you as always. Back at it again after the new year.
I know, right? It's time. I know. So first of all, I guess we'll just kind of talk about something that you did over this past week, Cris, and that was you attended an event where you actually got to meet and listen to Dave Ramsey.
I did, actually. And we'll be the first to say that not all financial advisors agree with each other. I think that, could be said and probably agreed upon by many financial advisors. If you go to someone's office, you're likely to get multiple opinions. But what you're looking for is commonality in the way that the messaging should be, entering your ears and your eyes as you look at financial plans. But so Dave Ramsey, I think he's great. I think he's a good person. I think he's helped millions of people around the United States and probably even beyond that to some degree. But he's done a really good job building his organization, and they do things the right way when it comes to messaging and getting out of debt. I think they have a phenomenal tough love get out of debt program, and I think our investment philosophy would be a little off there. But all of that being said, listening to him was phenomenal. He's a very good speaker. The stories that he tells were great. And I just made some bullet points, and I just wanted to kind of share these over the airwaves because I think it'll resonate with a lot of people out there listening to the show. And one of the things he said multiple things that really struck me. And the first one that I noted was, you become what you think about all the time. So, just let that resonate and just think about what you think about all the time and see where that's leading you in life. And I thought that was really, really powerful. One of the other things that he said, or he called it, or they call it, I think this is their term, but they call it the displacement theory. So like if you have dirt in your life, you can continue to inject cleanness into your life and it will displace the dirt from your life. And as he was talking about this, he was talking about his wife, Sharon. And Sharon is very healthy and every morning drinks a green smoothie. And those of you who are listening who have drank a green smoothie, I have. I probably don't do it every morning like Sharon does. But that stuff gets all in the glass, and you got to go take and wash that glass out pretty good. So while he's telling this story about Sharon and his wife offering him a drink of that every morning, there's this clip of a dirty green glass with like faucet water kind of running into the glass. And over the next minute, as he tells the story, that glass goes from green liquid to basically clear as the clean water kind of washes through the glass and all of that. And you guys can visualize that because we've all had a glass where we've drank something and we've put it in the sink and we've kind of rinsed it out. And that was really the point there. And that was huge for me. I kind of know this stuff, but to hear it again in a conference setting and talk about, if you have dirt in your life, bring in more clean and it'll kind of flush out all the dirt.
Yeah.
So, and then another thing he said was, you'll become who you hang around. And I think we've all heard that. And that's probably what we tell our kids. And we should probably listen to ourselves sometimes, as you'll become who you hang around. So be careful. And, one of the other things he said was, we exist to be a blessing to others. And I think that is the messaging in our firm. And I brought that up in our Monday meeting this week was, that is why we do what we do. We do exist to be a blessing to others. And I think that's, something that's really important for you to hear. The other thing he said two other things here. Money is not evil, because I think when you think about it in biblical terms, money's the root of evil.
All evil.
You hear that a lot,
Money's
right?
the root of all evil, yeah.
And it's really nice. The love of money, I think, is what the Bible actually says. But what he said was, money's not evil. It just makes you more of who you already are.
Ooh.
So just let that resonate out there. Just take that in and just let that soak in a little bit. And then he mentions Acts 20:35, which I'm not a really good scripture quoter, but it's better to give than to receive is essentially what this verse is. And I think that's a great principle to live by. I really, really do. So listening to him, Louann, I tell you what, I walked out of there with there's hope in humanity, because there's a lot of stuff going on around the world and the United States. I mean, just look at what's going on in Iran, which is, by the way, not getting any airtime, and it should, because it's kind of a big deal over there. But, there's stuff going on in Minnesota and just cities around the world. And just walking out of that conference really just gave me kind of, okay, there's hope in humanity.
Yes.
There are people like him, like us. I feel like we try to project a positivity about us at WG as well. But just kind of gave me hope in humanity. So it was a great conference. Jennifer and I got the opportunity to spend there, and that was a great close to the conference.
Gosh, thank you for sharing those talking points. Really, really good messages. That's awesome. All right. So, I'm jealous that you got to meet him. That Haley and Cody, my daughter and son, they followed his the one debt free, his whole debt free thing, and they became debt free. Yeah. And so they speak every session to our people who are getting married or seriously dating about getting out of debt. They do the financial part of that, and they share their story about getting out of debt. And that's the whole Dave Ramsey thing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Great.
So, okay. So now I want to get from you guys, and Graham, I'm going to ask you about this. The Federal Minute, you've got some great information for us.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk for a minute about something that I've been seeing a lot of recently. We've had a big influx here of federal employees. We always have a pretty steady stream with just the concentration of them around here, but especially recently with everything going on in the government and the DRPs and all of that. However, I've been seeing a lot of people retiring or wanting to retire on what's called an MRA plus 10. So like a minimum retirement age plus 10. And basically what that means is you've reached your minimum retirement age and you have 10 or more years of service at that point. And a lot of people that have come in, they've kind of been interested in doing it. It's sort of been what they've been working towards, I guess, but they're maybe not really 100% sure exactly what it entails. So I just wanted to very quickly, go over that if there's anybody listening that applies to and has maybe been thinking about that or doesn't know what it is. So essentially the difference between, doing an MRA plus 10 and doing a normal retirement, which would be fully eligible. So there's different benchmarks for that, 30 years in MRA, 20 years in 60, or 5 years past 62. So if you're somebody that, you've worked for the federal government for 11 years, you're 58 years old and you want to retire today. Essentially what that looks like is you can retire and you can start your pension. You can keep your health insurance. You can keep your life insurance. Obviously you keep your TSP. But if you start your pension immediately, there's going to be a penalty for each year that it's really monthly, but it maths out to about 5% a year for each year that you are under what your unreduced age would be. So if 62 is when you were fully eligible and you retired at 57, it'd be about 5% for each year in between that. So 5 years. So for a lot of people, they end up having to kind of weigh the pros and cons of, do I postpone that pension and wait until I get to 62 or 60 when I'm fully eligible and then take it, or do I take it a little bit earlier? So that's a big scenario that we've been going over with a lot of people here recently, because if you suspend your pension, you also suspend your FEHB and your FEG lease. You might have to go find health insurance somewhere else. It's a very complicated decision. So if you're somebody out there who's thinking about potentially retiring on an MRA plus 10, you're thinking, hey, I might go next year, the year after, I think it'd be good to talk to somebody who really understands how that works, what your different options are, and kind of see, hey, is it worth taking the penalty and going out a little earlier? How close am I to, not getting my pension unreduced? How much longer do I need to work? Or, can I afford to do it? So again, just one thing that we've been seeing increasingly more of. And if you're someone who has questions about that, definitely give us a call.
Sure. Absolutely. Good stuff, Graham. Yeah, you're right. We run into all kind of scenarios, but that one seems to be cropping up a lot lately.
Yeah.
Okay. Super. Love to hear that. All right. And Cris, why don't you give a little bit of a market summary from 2025 to now?
Yeah, I felt like today would be a good day to do that. So the S&P over the last year, so 2025, it was up almost 18%. So turned out to be a pretty good year. And as I sit here, I'm recalling a conversation in one of the episodes that we had, and Graham's over there grinning right now, but about where we thought the market would finish for the year. And I'm going to see if our radio producer can pull that actual clip where we talked about the returns for the year. And I'm pretty sure that I said double digits for the S&P, and I can't remember exactly what Graham
said, like 9%. I think you were just under double digits, but I was a bit lower. Yeah, I think I was like 4 or 5.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I guess in the what is it? The Price is Right, where you don't want to go over.
Yeah, you don't want to go over. Yeah.
I guess I won the prize there, but
I did.
Yeah, it was a little higher than I thought. But hey, you know what? Wow. That's why even analysts, looking at last year, probably many of them weren't projecting an 18% year, but the S&P was up 18%. Also, just want to give a shout out to bonds last year, because they haven't been a very good subject in the last 3 to 4 years. The aggregate bond index was up 7.3%. So pretty decent year with bonds. So as yields started to fall last year, bonds kind of picked up the pace a little bit. But if you go back and look at the last 10 years, bonds are still awful in terms of return because of what happened in 2022 and 3. But just bonds haven't been great. But last year they were positive. So I just kind of want to give a little summary, high level summaries, stocks and bonds. And as far as this year, let's look at, kind of moving forward. I think if you look at all of the analysts out there and you just kind of boil it down, to a return, what are they saying? Big firms out there, and it's somewhere between 9 and 12%. So that's kind of what the forecasting is looking like when it comes to actual the S&P itself. So somewhere between 9 and 12%. And then of course, when we look at bonds, analysts are saying somewhere around 4. That's kind of what they're saying for this year. So that's kind of a heads up on what a lot of really, I would say, what smart money is saying about the markets, but also know that smart money wasn't predicting a 18-ish% return last year either. So stay invested, build a plan, stick with it. The younger you are, probably makes sense to hold a few more stocks and less to zero bonds in some cases. So yeah, that's kind of a quick summary for the market.
Awesome. Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to give out your phone number right now before we move on, 256-937-2010. You may call or text the word visit to get in and meet these friendly guys that you're hearing on the radio with your retirement questions. They would love to meet with you, all right? And then also check them out on their website too, wgfinancialgroup.com. And thank you for joining us. I'm Louann Fulmar, here with Cris and Graham. And, if you think about it, I want to get into a topic that you guys brought forward, and that's why rules of thumb exist and why they are dangerous. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, most of us were raised on retirement rules of thumb, like, oh, you got to save 10% of what you earn, or that 4% rule. Okay.
Mhm.
And as any engineers listening today would know, shortcuts do not work when you're trying to balance market volatility, taxes, inflation, and longevity. So, what we're going to do right now is take these common rules apart to see how they collide with the real world. And we're going to show you how to build a more reliable plan using the Rite Retirement process. This is what they will take you through at WG Financial Group. And Cris and Graham are going to be explaining all this to us. Rite stands for, here's the process: retirement income, that's the I, investments, tax efficiency, and estate planning. So I'm really excited to to move forward with this. Cris, why do you think people do cling so tightly to retirement rules of thumb?
Well, I think they're easy. And a lot of rules of thumb are what I would consider like catchy, and I think as humans, we want certainty in an uncertain world. And rules of thumb can make us feel that way even when they're not really best for us in a lot of cases. And I think the rules of thumb tend to ignore the interactions between income, taxes, investments, estate planning. I think that a lot of rules of thumb, when you start factoring in the whole picture, the holistic picture, those rules can just kind of ignore that. So, but one of the things we've talked about on the show before are blind spots. And I think that rules of thumb can create blind spots because you believe so strongly in the rule of thumb that you ignore other things and create blind spots. And I think all of us have those blind spots. And I think sometimes it takes other people to help you realize that you have blind spots. So in the case of like your financial planning, I know Graham and I have sat down with people where we can totally see they have a blind spot, but they can't see it. And they believe so strongly about it that they can't get over it. I know in my own home, I was talking about my wife on the show. She's great. She's great at pointing out blind spots, when I'm just so headstrong and believe a certain way. And, she'll tell me, hey, did you think about it this way? Yeah, exactly. So I think rules of thumb kind of look at one variable, and the process that we use at the office, the Rite process, RITE, it really kind of gives you that holistic aspect. And you can still carry the rules of thumb into that, but at the same time, I believe it ignores the holistic aspect.
Right. And when we look at, your process, Rite, RITE, that's 4 letters. And that's what you guys look at, 4 pillars about retirement that all interact together. So I love that. So let's go over rule of thumb number 1 that we all have heard about, the 4% rule. Probably one of the most famous ones, And this is, of course, where you take 4% of your portfolio every year and you'll never run out of money. That sounds pretty comforting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the rule itself actually came from a study that was ran by William Bengen in the 1990s. And it was published in the Journal of Financial Planning in 1994. And essentially what his research showed was that you can withdraw 4% of your initial portfolio value in the first year of retirement and then adjust for inflation subsequent withdrawals. And if you do that, there's a likelihood that your money could last 30 years. I think people like this rule because it's easy. I think people say, well, I can just draw 4% and I'm good. And I think there's some things that the rule tends to ignore. One of which, when the rule was created, we had bond yields that were a lot higher in the early 90s. And then, as everyone is well aware of, during the great financial crisis and the quantitative easing, crashing interest rates to zero, and then staying on the ZIRP policy, the zero interest rate policy, for more than a decade, those yields didn't quite perform the same way when William ran the data going back years that he pulled in for the study itself. So there's some things that the rule can ignore, especially on the bond side. And what we're looking at here is a mixture of asset classes. So we're looking at a mixture of stocks and bonds, roughly 50% each. And when one of those asset classes doesn't perform like the historical numbers that were used in this study, I think it can basically cause problems there.
So you guys have a lot of engineers coming in to see you guys. Why do engineers love this rule?
I think one of the big reasons that they do is, like any rule of thumb, it's a very very succinct, very, it makes sense, and it's just easy to kind of understand, but it's also easy to implement. So if you were, trying to run projections for retirement by yourself, not that engineers don't like numbers, they definitely do, but most people don't want to have to factor in, a bunch of different standard deviations and run through different historical market scenarios and then pull a percentage off of that. If you're trying to run scenarios, a lot of times it's a little easier to just say, hey, well, my portfolio value is X, my other income is Y. If they added those together, is that enough to cover my expenses if I just pull 4% off of that? So I think that that's a big reason why it's, so popular. And we do hear a lot of people come in and say, yeah, well, I got my pension, I got my Social Security, or, in a lot of cases, I just got my Social Security, and I'm going to just pull, 4% off my investments. And it just kind of, in their mind, makes sense. And to be honest, through most periods of history, you probably would be okay doing that. Through most periods of history, you would probably be okay doing that. But it's not as fixed as people think it is. There have been years, especially like the last few years, where if you were somebody who, you've been retired a few years and you've been maybe more aggressive with your investments, you probably could have pulled a heck of a lot more off than 4% and been totally fine, because the market's been up, almost 20+% for 3 years straight. So in those types of periods, you could probably be pulling off a little bit more. But then, as Cris mentioned, you have, the zero interest rate policy years, along with the, global financial crisis, those things like that, that they're kind of outliers, but there were people that retired in those years.
Yeah, right.
And you don't want to plan a retirement off of just, hey, well, it will most likely be fine as long as market conditions cooperate with how these other historical periods have been. So I think like I said, really, in essence, I think it's just a kind of an easy rule to implement if you're trying to maybe spreadsheet your own retirement. But doing the real math to kind of see where those withdrawals should be is going to take a lot more guesswork that you just kind of can't really know until you get there.
It is a very common thing that we hear. So yeah, it's definitely one. I think it's probably one of maybe the most notable rule, I guess, that we would hear about. There's several that we're going to talk about today, but I think this is the number one.
Probably, yeah.
But there's still, I've asked people before, just in conversation, because it came up. Have you heard of this rule? And there's a lot that don't know about it, but definitely this is I would say, the most known one.
Probably. Are there assumptions that are baked into it that people don't realize then?
There are. So the study itself, so when Bengen did this study, he went back like to 1926, I think it was, to pull the data, and then they used rolling 30-year periods. So that's one thing that you have to keep in mind is when we look at, the period that was used, so like the rolling 30 years, what you don't, take into consideration is, what if you retired at a really bad time? So let's say you retired in 1999, just before the dot-com bubble, burst, and then we had 9/11, and then we had the great financial crisis. If you look at returns from like 99 through 2009, the S&P was pretty flat there, and you had 3-year decline. I think it was 2000, 2001, and 2002 were all 3 negative years in the market. So just think about that from a retiree perspective. So let's say that you decide in 99 you're going to retire. Great 90s decade, 401k's grown, you've got enough to retire at this point, and then you retire, and then we have 3 negative years right out of the gate. One, that is a psychological nightmare that you're going to have to go through, because it's kind of like, if you think about 2022 is probably the most recent time that I could think about for our client base, is like, okay, when is this going to end? Like, when is this downward drift going to end? It's kind of like death by 1,000 cuts in 2022. Well, just think about that, where you go 3 years of negative market returns and you've just retired. So it's a psychological nightmare. It also, right out of the gate, if the market's off, 40%, you've lost 40% of your stock side of your portfolio, and you're trying to make withdrawals. And now all of a sudden you're introducing that sequence of return risk as well. So what the rule does is it gives some pretty good data. But I think as a retiree, one, you have to worry about when you retire, because we can look at the market returns on a historical basis. But hey, what is like, what is your retirement history going to look like, the period in which you retire? And then also, I think if the younger you are, I do think you got to be a little bit more careful, because the 4% rule was based on like a 30-year retirement. And I think there's the reality now. There are retirements that are, can go 35 and sometimes 40 years, depending on, when you actually retire. So let's say you retire at like 55 because you're like, hey, I can retire. I have enough saved. I've done everything I'm supposed to do, and I can use the rule of 55. And then you live to 95 years old. Well, that's a 40-year time horizon. The other thing too is just the sheer cost of healthcare today scares me, because I think that that could cause you to pull more out of the portfolio as well, especially later on in life when you're going to the doctor a little bit more, and healthcare just continues to go up like crazy. So I think there are some assumptions that were built into his study that kind of, I like to say it like this, kind of ignore real life. I know when I went through the CFP curriculum, you were taught, Graham, I know you've been through it as well. You were taught the book. And then you step into a meeting room and you have a family come in, and there's all of these different dynamics flying at you at the same time. And you're like, oh, wait a minute. The book didn't talk about this family.
The book, yeah.
The book gave me an easy example. And now I got this, and so how do we navigate this? And so I think that the 4% rule kind of ignores real life. It also ignores the fact that I think a lot of people think, okay, well, I can pull 4% of my starting value portfolio forever. But the way the real 4% rule works is the value of your portfolio drops, you have to take less income, because use $1 million, for example, here, you've got $1 million and starting out is $40,000 a year. But again, using the example of, hey, I retired in 1999, and then the market, let's just say, cut your portfolio in half, so I don't have to really think about the math on air. So you got $1 million, you're pulling 40. Now your portfolio is down to 500,000. Now you're pulling 20,000 and not 40,000.
That's
you're
half of what you were pulling. Yeah,
exactly. So that doesn't really make that clear to a lot of people who think they're going to use the 4% rule. You also have to have some flexibility in with that 4% rule as well. So those are just a few things I think it ignores.
Okay. Very, very good. So if you were going to tie this into, your acronym right, okay, the R, tell us about that, the retirement income and then investments. Go through that, please, for this.
Yeah. So I think when it comes to like retirement income, I think income matters more than the withdrawal percentage. So I think when people are planning their retirements, they need to take a look at the income, understand, how much income they're going to have coming in, and focus more on that than the actual withdrawal percentage. When it comes to investments, of course, you have to worry about your volatility, because this study was ran on a 50-50 mix. And I'm not at all advocating that, everybody should be 50-50. But you do have to think about your investments and how volatile they are. When it comes to, taxes, changes can happen in the tax code. You may have a lot of pre-tax money, and all of a sudden they change the tax code down the road, and now you're paying more in taxes. That's going to impact the longevity of your money as well. And then, sometimes your estate and legacy planning can determine how much risk you're going to take. So again, I think this is a bigger question than just, hey, can I take 4%? So yeah, that's how I would tie it into our Rite process.
Okay. So I want to take this time then to give out our information, okay? Make sure that you have this number, because if you have questions as we go through these rules of thumb and you're like, maybe I need to tweak what I'm doing, you can certainly get with Cris and Graham. And so, of course, here's the phone number, 256-937-2010. You can call, text the word visit. Cris and Graham are both certified financial planners, financial advisors at WG Financial Group, where Cris is president. Graham is also an enrolled agent at the firm. So, our motto is plan, retire, play. That is what they want for you. Remember to find us online at wgfinancialgroup.com. And this show is available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Just search for the name of our show, The Rite Retirement Show.
When headlines sound dramatic and markets appear restless, having a plan in place matters. Joining forces with Cris Wallace could offer fresh perspectives on how to adapt your approach while staying focused on long-term goals. Text visit to 256-937-2010. That's text VISIT to 256-937-2010. Explore how steady guidance makes a difference.
Are you a federal employee feeling pressure from the early retirement offers like VERA, VSIP, or the Deferred Resignation Program? Recent government initiatives have introduced significant changes to federal retirement programs, making employees feel pressured to consider early retirement or face potential layoffs. At WG Financial Group, we help guide federal employees through these uncertain times. Our team understands the complex federal retirement systems and can help you make informed decisions. Call 256-937-2010 to schedule your complimentary discovery session with us today. We'll help you assess your options and create a personalized retirement plan to help you feel more confident. Visit WGFinancialGroup.com or call 256-937-2010 to book your session. Firm is not affiliated with the U.S. government. Investment advisory services offered through AE Wealth Management, LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor.
Planning for retirement often sparks big questions, like how to make your savings last or what steps you should take next. Instead of stressing, why not get clear direction with a personalized meeting? Text VISIT to 256-937-2010. That's text VISIT to 256-937-2010. Connect with Cris Wallace and discover the next chapter of your financial story.
So, all right, we are talking about rules of thumb, okay? And this is pretty fun because we're kind of showing how you maybe need to take each rule of thumb with a grain of salt. So the next one, let me make sure, I about went ahead of myself. So the next rule of thumb, number 2, is that you need 25 times your income in retirement or to retire. So people say, oh yeah, you have to have saved 25 times your income to be able to retire. Meaning if you make $200,000, you need to make you need to have $5 million saved. So is that actually true?
I would have to say absolutely not on that one. Very rarely do you meet someone who's retired that has 25 times their ending salary in retirement. That would be a lot for most people, because the reality of it is, for the majority of people, especially people right now in that, Gen X, boomer kind of age group, it's not a group of people that tends to spend most or all of their income, for one thing. I say that right off the bat, that, you hear a lot, about overspending and different age demographics and whatnot. But generally, when you meet somebody that, is in their late 50s, early 60s, or getting ready for retirement, if they're making $100,000 a year, $150,000, chances are they are not spending near all of that. Because typically by that point in life, you have not a lot of debt. You might still have a mortgage. You're probably towards the tail end of it if you do. A lot of people don't have car payments anymore. The kids are probably out of the house, or, maybe finishing up school or something like that. So expenses tend to really drop in that part of life. But another part of it is that your portfolio is not going to be your only income source in retirement. At the very, very least, as long as you worked for 10 years, 40 quarters, you're going to have Social Security as well. And I know some people, I was talking to someone recently who wasn't, just somebody that I know, and they were saying that, when I think about retirement in the future, and they're not actually that far away, probably within 10 years, I would say, they were saying, we just don't plan that Social Security is going to be there at all. It's definitely not going to be there in, 5-10 years. And, I'm thinking about that, and it's like, okay, if they got rid of Social Security completely in 5 years from now, that would be an absolute disaster for all of the people in that age demographic. At the very least, if something did happen to it, you'd probably be grandfathered in. But anyways, we firmly believe you're going to have Social Security. Will there be some changes to the program? Yeah, maybe, probably. But will you receive $0 from it? I would say probably not. That's very unlikely. Yeah. So that income source, is going to be a lot of income for most retirees. I would say the average we see for a married couple is somewhere in the $40,000 to $60,000 a year range. And so your portfolio really more or less has to supplement that. So for most people that we see, I would say that if you want to have a really comfortable retirement, 10 times your ending salary is probably pretty good, but that doesn't necessarily mean you couldn't retire on 5. It really just depends on your other income sources, what you're spending, what kind of lifestyle you want to live. So yes, if you're somebody out there that, makes $200,000 a year and thinks you need 500 or 5 million to retire, trust me, we have talked to plenty of people that made around that much money and did not need that much to retire. So
I think the rule itself, it kind of ties to number 1. So if you kind of do the math on it and 25 times your ending salary and then use the 4% rule. So I think the 4% rule and this rule kind of run hand in hand, so to speak. But 100% agree with you, Graham. No way do you need 25 times most people, I should say.
Most people.
I'd say most. You can't say everybody because that'll get you in trouble. But I would say most people, they don't need that.
And income matters once you retire, right?
It does. 100% it does.
Yeah. Okay. So what if most of your money is in pre-tax accounts?
I mean, I think the biggest thing you have to consider if most of your money is pre-tax is the fact that, you don't have all of that. Some of that is going to the IRS.
So you're saying you don't own it all?
You don't. You own it all, but
you don't.
But you don't. You don't at the same time. You can pay more or less depending on how smart you are and with how you withdraw it, and if you have a strategy for doing that. But at the end of the day, if you got 500, if you got $1 million, if you got 2 million, all pre-tax, you don't have that much. So you have to kind of plan around that when you're talking about, something like a withdrawal percentage, because you might say, heck, let's talk about, hate to go back to the 4% rule again, but if you have $1 million pre-tax and you're like, hey, well, I only need, my Social Security is $30,000 a year and I'll use the 4% rule. I'll pull 40 from my IRA and, that'll get me to 70 and I need 70. And I know I need 70 a year. Well, you're going to have to pull more than 40 to get 40 net, in that exact number. You wouldn't be in a super high tax bracket in that scenario, but even so, there's going to be some taxes due on that, whether you're in the 10, the 12, the 22. So you have to consider that because we've had, a few conversations I had recently with a client who wanted to make a pretty big purchase, and they were pretty sticker shocked when I told them, hey, yeah, we can totally do that. You can afford to do it, but you need X amount of money, and what you're going to need to pull is about 24% higher than what you think it is if you want to actually net that amount. And that's hard for a lot of people. That's not an easy thing to do because it can already be a tough thing to be pulling out of those accounts. And now you're saying, oh, I have to pull out even more than I thought to get to that net number. So again, it doesn't mean you can't do it. It doesn't mean that if you have $1 million, you should say that you only have 500 for retirement or anything like that. But it does mean that when you're running assumptions, you can't look at that as a net number. You really have to consider the taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, tell us how this rule of thumb ties into RITE, R-I-T-E.
Yeah. So again, I think everything, you can tie it back to income. And I think when you take a look at this rule of thumb here, the R, retirement income, is really driven by spending and guaranteed income, not necessarily your salary. And Graham mentioned the taxes. I mean, that is so important to take a look at, how much of that, of the money that you do own is actually pre-tax money, or what tax classification is the money. And then of course the investments there. It's important to take a look at volatility. I mean, that's probably going to be a recurring theme as we go through this. A lot of what I'm saying here. It's why it's important to build a plan, go through a process, and look at the big picture, and not just use rules of thumb, because the rules of thumb ignore so many other things when it comes to retirement planning.
All right. Again, our phone number 256-937-2010. Call or text the word visit. And remember our website, wgfinancialgroup.com. We thank you so much for spending part of your day with us today. This is the Rite Retirement Show with Cris Wallace and Graham Bauer of WG Financial Group, where Cris is president there. We're so excited to have you along, and we are going over rules of thumb. We are ready for rule of thumb number 3. This is a classic, okay, to subtract your age from 100 to find out your stock allocation. Okay, so you're 65, you should have 35% in stocks. So why does this rule exist?
I don't know. It's the dumbest rule out there. It is. It is the dumbest rule out there. I couldn't wait to get this. So Graham was like, "Do you want me to answer this?" We're pointing at each other. No. I'm taking this one.
Yeah.
I'm saved like I'm going to sound purely like Dave Ramsey. Stupid rule. Dumb.
Stupid.
What are you doing? It's dumb. Yeah, it's just kind of silly to me to use 100 and subtract your age. So I've talked about this before. It's probably been a while. So let's talk about this just common sense wise for a second. So you're going to subtract your age from 100. Okay, let's say that you're 85 years old,
right,
and you've got, I don't know, $1 million left in your portfolio.
Okay.
I mean, at 85, your life expectancy is probably 5 to 7 years max. Is statistically what it is. You got 7 years to run out of money with $1 million. Probably not going to happen. So I could make an argument, and again, not saying that every 85-year-old needs to go out and do this, but I can make an argument you could be all stocks. Yeah. You got 7 years of life left. You're probably not going to run out of money.
Right.
So I think this is like the dumbest rule ever because it just ignores so much. And I'm sure you'll have some follow-up questions here, and I can't wait to get further into this one, but I think this is the dumbest rule. So if somebody is... if you're in an advisor office and they say, Mr. and Miss Jones, you're 60 years old, so you should only have 40% of your money in stocks. Run. Run. Just say, okay, meeting adjourned. You're done.
Yeah.
Get out.
Okay.
Kick them out of their own office.
Kick them out of their own office. Put your feet on the table.
It's my office.
Pop a Diet Coke or whatever. Yeah. I own this place now.
That's so funny. So, okay. So explain, you did a great job there of me thinking, yeah, if I'm 85, I may as well try to make as much money as I can for my loved ones. But talk about why this does not fit modern retirees.
Well, one, it totally ignores, like we said a few minutes ago about the other rules, the other sources of income.
Yeah.
So, we work with a lot of federal employees. We work with a lot of defense individuals that work for the big companies out there, the big defense companies. They have pensions, right? So you have pension, maybe you have a military pension as well. So maybe you have a federal pension, a military, you're a double dipper. You serve the country 20 years, you got your pension, then you went back to work in the government and you got a first pension. And all of a sudden you have 2 pensions and a Social Security. Unless you're spending, gobs and gobs of money every single month, you're probably not going to need all of your assets. So then we have to talk about what's called time horizon. So then your time horizon for your investments is a lot longer. So in a situation like that, it's a dumb rule. You're 65 years old, you're retired, say, okay, well, you should have 35% of your money in stocks. Well, guess what? I have all of my basic living expenses covered by guaranteed pensions and Social Security. I don't really need my TSP or my 401k at that point. So why do I only need to have 35? Because it's a dumb rule. That's why. And it just ignores so many other aspects, especially the other sources of income. So yeah, that's my answer on that one, Louann.
Yeah, it's just funny to me too on that one that, you can obviously talk about it later in life, but even earlier in life that someone who's 20 years old needs to be divesting away from stocks and, more long-term growth vehicles at all. Cause it's like, hey, if you're saving for retirement at 20 and you got 40 years, 45 years left, something like that. I mean, I don't think I could find a single analyst who would tell me that over the next 45 years, there's going to be, you're going to take a loss. If you were invested in the broad stock market for the next 45 years, I don't think I could find a single analyst that would tell me that. It would have to be a pretty catastrophic next 50 years. So, I totally agree. Just all around, it definitely is. And it's actually not one that we hear brought up a lot, though, I would say, compared to the 4% rule. But you do hear it from time to time. And but I think it follows that notion, like on a previous question. I think, Louann, you had asked, why do people like this rule? And I think this one, if you were going to say, why do some people maybe like this rule? It's because, again, it sort of follows what conventional wisdom might say, which is, oh, I'm older, I need to just be more conservative in every facet of my life. I'm older, so I need to, not do risky things. I shouldn't go skydiving anymore. I also shouldn't be invested in the stock market.
You definitely shouldn't do that.
Yeah, maybe
Stay
you
off
shouldn't
ladders.
do that if you're 85 years old. But again, I think it's just one of those things that it just on paper, it sounds like it makes sense. But if you really think about it and if you apply it to people's actual real life scenarios, it really starts to fall apart.
Good input there, Graham. Good input on the younger side, right? Because I totally agree. Like my sons are 23 years old, so they should have 77% stock exposure at 23.
Wow.
Wrong. Wrong. That's why it's a dumb rule. Thank you for bringing that up, Graham.
Yeah, that'd be a lot. Okay.
Yeah.
So, Cris, tie this into right. Tie this rule of thumb into right.
Yeah,
RIT.
your investments really, when we talk about RIT, let's focus on the I here. Your investments should really match your income needs and or your time horizon. And so this rule, like I just made the example because Graham brought up the younger side of things. That's why it's a dumb rule. When it comes to retirement, did I make that clear enough? I'm not sure I made that clear enough.
Say it one more time for the people in the back.
It's a dumb rule. So the R, in terms of the process, you're going to need your investments to produce income. So, sometimes you may need a little bit more growth. And so you may be in a situation where you're not going to get the growth that you're looking for or need for your retirement. So yeah, this is how we tie it back. We look at all of that in that right process.
Okay, very good. Let's move on to rule number 4. We're talking today about why rules of thumb exist and why they're dangerous. This one is, everyone's told to delay their Social Security to age 70 because it gives you the highest check. But is the highest check always the best strategy?
I would love to meet someone who believed this rule of thumb, to be honest, because I think for most people, even if that is the rule of thumb, the water cooler expert at work rule of thumb is take it at 62 because you're going to die at 63.
Yeah.
But as far as, delaying till 70, I won't get on the high horse about early collection here. Again, like any of these, it depends. I would say that for a lot of people, that might not be a bad idea, actually. This is the first one that I'd say for probably, I could make an argument, at least for married individuals, that for a majority of married, high earner married individuals, that might actually make sense for them. But again, like anything else, you really have to look at your scenario and kind of see if it makes sense for you. I'll give you an example. Recently had a client pass away and their spouse can collect their benefit, as early as 60 and as late as 67. So they actually can't delay theirs till 67. Again, this is a case where maybe if it was just, a married couple, you wanted to protect the spouse, you might say, hey, you need to delay as long as possible. But based on other income sources, based on, investment withdrawals, all these types of different things, it actually might make sense to collect it a little bit earlier because, hey, once you pass away, it is gone forever. So now when we're down to one person, whether you're single, whether you're widowed, it might make sense to say, hey, do I really want to delay it till 70? You might actually start to look at your family health history a little bit at that and say, maybe I do want to get a little bit more out of it if I have no one that's going to be able to continue this benefit after I'm gone. But on the other side of the fence, you might want to consider the tax implications of that and everything else. So there are scenarios where I would say, if I was just to give a blanket recommendation to someone, they were like, hey, we're pretty comfortable in retirement. Should we delay our Social Security? My base answer would probably be, yeah, probably wouldn't be a bad idea if you have, other money you can pull from. But again, it really depends on everything else in your situation. So, and then one thing I'll say where that definitely wouldn't do that. If you're the lower earning spouse and you're just going to collect a small benefit and maybe a spousal benefit, that's a case where it probably doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to be delaying all the way to 70, because even if the percentages are the same, the dollar amounts are going to be pretty inconsequential. I mean, we've seen cases where you're talking about, 3 years to wait for an extra $115 a month or something like that, or $220 or something, where it's just not going to make a huge impact to your lifestyle. So again, depends on your scenario. I would say this one is maybe better than the other ones if everyone was to follow this, but I think that most people would actually hate this rule of thumb on the surface.
Yeah, when we put the notes together, I kind of found it odd when we were doing our research. So this, kind of like to your point, that this was actually a rule of thumb there. The other thing with regards to Social Security is the lower income earner, you mentioned that, it becomes magnified if there's an age gap too. So let's say your spouse is, I don't know, 7 years, 7, like the young kids. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I just did that. I'm
I
doing
guess
my hands.
it's not a thing anymore. It's not a thing anymore, Chris.
Well, it is today, Louann, and we're going to keep it going, all right? So,
the kids are mad that the adults started using it.
yeah, we stole it from them. So take that, you little punks. Anyway, so it gets worse if you're, we'll just say 8 years older. The lower income earner needs to just go ahead and collect at 62 at that point, because they're probably missing out on some additional spousal Social Security. So that wouldn't make sense for them to wait for sure. The other thing that I wanted to talk about here was waiting till 70 is a big psychological hurdle for a lot of people to get over. So a lot of what you'll find in retirement is emotions and psychology, and they kind of work hand in hand with each other. But getting over the psychological aspect of, I'm going to wait longer to collect my Social Security. But Graham, you said this before. Some people treat it like a game, and they don't want to lose or feel like they're getting gypped. So while you're delaying, there's this mental battle going on in your head, this struggle, this wrestling match with the Social Security Administration. I can kind of picture this, a jiu-jitsu match between you and the Social Security Administration representative. And you're trying to wait, and you're wrestling with, I want to go ahead and claim, because you're worried about the break even, and you're worried about not getting enough money. And clearly, if you have a lower income earning spouse, you have to think about Social Security differently than you would if the income amounts were about the same, because we've seen couples that come in and their Social Security amounts are almost identical. I mean, they're usually not identical, but they're within a few $100s of each other. But if you're talking about one spouse has like a $3,800 benefit at FRA, and the other spouse, may have $1,000, you have to look at that as a spousal protection aspect as well. So, here again, it's a rule of thumb. It's a rule of thumb people aren't going to like, because there's a lot of psychological battle there. But to Graham's point, out of all the things that we've talked about today, this is probably one of my favorites. And I'm not encouraging people to wait to 70, by the way. We try to get you to FRA because we feel like that's a good age to really take a good look at starting Social Security. But more and more people, and I'll attribute our radio show because we talk about Social Security a lot, we'll take the credit for that. More and more people are trying to wait a little bit longer, especially if they're in good health and they want to make sure that their lower income earning spouse has more money.
Chris, tie this rule of thumb to RITE, R-I-T-E again.
Yeah, retirement income, it's lifetime income. I know people say, oh, it's the government, whatever. Yeah, I get it. It is. But for all intents and purposes, it's COLA adjusted lifetime income. And then taxes, come on, 85%. Only 85% can be taxed, 15% is for free. The larger that amount is, the larger that 15% in terms of dollars is for free. And then when you look at the estate planning side of it, the E of it, it affects the survivor income. So it's Social Security is a big deal. People take it too lightly, in my opinion.
Okay, very good. And I want to mention too is the reason I keep saying tie it in to RITE, R-I-T-E, that is their process, okay, at WG Financial Group, the Rite Retirement process. And that's income, investments, tax efficiency, and estate and legacy planning. So just for anybody who's just joined in, that's why I keep going back to tie each one of these rules of thumb into RITE. So moving on now to another rule of thumb. It's number 5 here for the 5th rule of thumb. And this one is that you're going to spend less in retirement. We're told, you probably spend about 80%, 70 to 80% of what you actually spent while you were working. Is that actually true for high net worth engineers?
I think it's true for just about anybody that you could spend less in retirement. I would tell you that most people don't want to spend less in retirement. Yeah. So this is a rule you have to really look at individually as a family. But to just say that you're going to spend less in retirement, I would say no, because you have the family out there that, let's just say combined income, maybe they're making, I don't know, $160,000 a year between the both of them. By the time they make their contributions to their 401k, federal and state withholdings, FICA withholdings, now they're down to a certain amount of spendable income. And I can tell you that a lot of families that we've sat down with, one of the questions I will ask them is, okay, well, tell me, do you use a budget? No, actually, I don't. We don't use a budget. We just kind of spend what we make. Okay, cool. All right. We don't have to work off a budget. because it sounds to me like you have all of your money automated. So on the top end of your paycheck, everything's going out to the Roth IRA or the 401k, and some goes to taxes, and then boom, there's an amount that lands in the bank account. What's that amount? Oh, it's $4,000 biweekly. We make basically $4,000 every other week. Okay, cool. We can use $8,000 a month as an expense. Well, I can tell you that in that example, that family is not going to want to go down to $6,000 a month because their lifestyle is been built upon $8,000 a month. And honestly, I wouldn't want to do that either. I wouldn't want to retire and step down in lifestyle. I wouldn't want to retire and stop going out to eat. I ate at Char last night we had an employee that had their 1 year anniversary and they wanted to go to Char. Aww. So we took them and their spouse out to eat at Char. Well, if you're used to going out to eat at a decent steakhouse or a restaurant, you're not going to start eating TV dinners like every night. Like you might as well keep working. That ain't retirement. So this rule of thumb that you'll spend less in retirement, I do disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think you can spend less in retirement, but now you're going to be like, battling yourself. Oh my gosh, I'm going to run out of money. I need to spend less. And now you can't. I'm afraid to go do the things that I was doing while I was working. Well, shoot, you might as well keep working at that point. So I don't really agree with this rule as well. And I know that we're getting kind of towards the end of the show, so I don't want to get too long-winded on this. So I think just on this note, I think we'll kind of end it like this. Rules of thumb are just rules of thumb. And I think that they're okay to like look at, and as long as in your mind, it's a rule of thumb. I think what's important for most families out there today, whether they're here, another state or wherever, I think it's important that you build a plan. And I think it's important that you find a financial professional or a financial team that you can rely on that thinks about things in the big picture sense and stays away from the rules of thumb. I've used rules of thumb before in my own planning. I've used them as a quick calculation in a conference room before. But I think when it comes down to your retirement, your family, your legacy, your income, your investments, your taxes, all of that, I think is more important and requires and really demands of you more intentional effort in building out the financial plan as opposed to just kind of working off of a rule of thumb. So my message today is find a team you can trust, go in, sit down with them, and have them help you. I think I've said before, Louann, on the air, that I have my money professionally managed. My IRA is professionally managed. Why? Because I'm psycho about my money too. I'm emotional about my money too. I want to touch it. I want to say, oh, this is the right move. I have mine professionally managed, so it keeps my hands back off of it. I have a CPA that works with me and my company on tax strategies. I have an attorney that I had built. So I have a team as well. So my advice for anyone listening to the show today is go find those professionals. And again, whether it's us or someone else, that's okay. Go find a team of individuals that you can trust, that is going to have your family's best interest in mind, and build out a retirement plan for you to take that off your plate, because you need to be expensing energy into your spouse, to your kids, to your grandkids. That's where your focus needs to be. And it needs to be off the dadgum phone and off the computer screen, staring at your accounts all the time. So we are out of time with that. So good rules of thumb episode, Louann. I appreciate you kind of tossing the questions at us. If you want to give us a call and set up an appointment with us, we're happy to talk to you. Our number is 256-937-2010. Again, the number is 256-937-2010. I hope everybody has an awesome and blessed week. And remember to serve every person in every situation with a servant heart.
Graham Bauer holds the enrolled agent designation, but is not currently offering tax preparation services. Neither the firm nor its agents may give tax advice. Individuals should consult with a qualified professional for guidance before making any purchasing decisions.
Investment advisory services made available through AE Wealth Management LLC, AEWM. AEWM and WG Financial Group are not affiliated companies. Insurance products are offered through the insurance business WG Insurance Services. WG Financial Group is an investment advisory practice that offers products and services through AE Wealth Management LLC, AEWM, a registered investment advisor. AEWM does not offer insurance products. The insurance products offered by WG Insurance Services are not subject to investment advisory requirements. AEWM and WG Financial Group are not affiliated companies. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This radio show is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual situation. WG Financial is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. Information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by WG Financial. This radio show is a paid placement.